My name is Mike Dane. I'm the training director here at MLS Technology. The class today is actually kind of an important one. We're going to be discussing the rules and regulations. Now, the rules and regulations class is, under normal circumstances, actually just meant to kind of give you guys tips and tricks and kind of introduce you to the main focuses of our rules and regulations, just to make sure that you guys are not overstepping any lines that you shouldn't be, et cetera, et cetera. This one, though, is on the heels of some pretty significant changes to our rules and regulations. So I wanted to actually address a couple of the changes that have occurred and then also address any questions that you may have that are directly MLS related. I did want to kind of give a little bit of a heads up before we actually dive into more of the rules and regs themselves. I did want to clarify that what we're going to be focusing on today, as well as what our focus on is on the rest of the time when we're answering questions on the help desk and all the rest of that stuff, we are going to be focused entirely on just what our rule is in the industry. So when it comes to which forms are going to be required or whether or not you're going to have to, assign specific contracts with your clients and things like that, those are questions that are going to be a little bit outside of our purview. So typically, if you do have questions about, for instance, the most recent changes to how buyers brokers are going to need to have their clients sign contracts and things in advance of doing other services for them. Those are all questions that I would very strongly suggest that you guys seek the assistance of OREC for. Now, we do have a form specialist here at GTAR that can answer any questions about forms. Typically, the area of expertise for our forms expert, Tiffany Valines, will be with the GTAR forms. So any of the forms that we have specifically created, but it's worth mentioning that she might at least be able to give you a little bit more of a spoken answer. I know that oftentimes reaching out to OREC can be difficult, but if you do have any questions for OREC, I usually recommend just reaching out to them by email. We can provide you guys that email if you need it. But in the interim, I'm going to jump us back on course, and we're going to start talking about the MLS technology rules and regulations. So first and foremost, I wanted to actually just address one thing real quick before we dive in, and that's how to actually find our current rules and regulations. Now, thankfully, we will always keep these up to date. So what that means is that even after we've actually gone through the process of making a change to our rules and regulations, you can always find the most recent version of the GTAR rules and regulations, or specifically the bylaws, or the MLS rules and regulations under MLS governing documents or GTAR governing documents. Now, I did want to point out, I've already signed in to mlstechnology.com, that portal.mlstechnology.com. This is where you guys normally get into Matrix, Realist, etc. Below that is going to be a section for services, where you guys can edit your profile that you have with the Matrix system, with our membership team. You can find all of the forms and contracts that GTAR specifically has released, as well as any MLS forms. And then also, again, the bylaws and the rules and regulations for us. Now, when we get to the MLS governing documents, there's going to be a section on here that's specifically the MLS Tech Rules and Regs. Whatever document you find on this particular webpage will always be the most recent, most up-to-date version of the rules and regulations. If you have a saved copy on your computer, cool. Just double check what the date is that this particular form came out so that you're working with the most up-to-date version. Now, this particular version was actually released officially on August 5th. The completed version of the rule changes occurred on July 17 of 2024. And then, of course, again, after everything was kind of said and done, got released on the 5th when they fully went into effect. Now, when you're looking at this particular document, just remember that this is a PDF, but much like a PDF that you find anywhere else on your computer, or even if you guys happen to be working in some programs like Microsoft Word, you can actually search within a document by doing Control F if you're on a Windows computer, or if you guys happen to be on a Mac, it'll be Command F. But what Control F does is it'll bring up a little search function for me. Now, I'm looking at this in Firefox, which is a browser kind of like Chrome or Safari. So it brought up its search function down here towards the bottom. If I were doing this in Chrome, there would be a little search function right up here at the top right corner. Let me illustrate that because I need to be better about annotating things when I'm describing stuff. But yeah, so if I did Control F, I would see a little search function up here at the top. When you're doing it in Microsoft Word, there's a search function that comes up over at the right or the left over here. But for me, I got Firefox, so it's down here at the bottom. Can I clear all of those at the same time? Clear. Perfect. Okay, excellent. Back to my mouse. So when I'm wanting to search for something, I can just type it down here at the bottom. For instance, if I wanted to learn more about photos, which we'll be discussing in a minute here, I can type in photo and I'll see that there's 21 matches. So as I cycle through this, either by hitting enter or hitting the arrows up and down, I can kind of move my way through this document. In Chrome in particular, you'll actually see some highlights where each of the results are actually on that document. So as I'm scrolling through, I can see all the different references to it. So every time there's some mention of the word photo or photography or exclusive or whatever the term is that you're searching for, you'll be able to see it quickly and easily on here. But we're actually going to be circling back around to this particular section in just a minute here. In the interim, though, I'm just going to leave it at that. So again, get to the MLS portal, MLS governing documents. We have our MLS Tech Rules and Regs. That's the most recent version, and I would very strongly recommend that you guys at least know where that can be found. Now, next, I wanted to actually mention when you're looking at listings, in Matrix, we do actually provide you guys a quick and easy way for you to report violations. So if you happen to come across a property that maybe has some kind of inaccuracy in it, or there's some kind of problem with it, or just outright there's a straight up misrepresentation of the property or something that's unethical, anything like that, there is a report option that you guys can use. Let me just grab a result, hopefully not actually find a result with a violation on it. Hey, perfect. All right, this will work. Courthouse records. What are the big ones here? Right, kind of unplatted. Okay, well, okay. In this case, thankfully, again, I'm actually kind of glad that we didn't end up with one that has a violation. But if we do end up seeing something on here that's just radically bad, or you guys see that they've got their business card loaded as a photo or whatever, there is a report a violation button up here. It'll provide you guys a pop-up. Now, there's a few options on here by default. I did want to mention none of these actually are required for you guys to be able to put in a violation. It does not have to be one of these 4 items in order for it to be reported. Again, all you're doing is just letting us know that there might be something that we need to investigate. You can always just use this other option and then just put down your concern down here at the bottom and just explain this was supposed to be pending weeks ago, no longer accepting showings, but still active. Which is a problem that we see often. So again, not in this case, just using this as an example. Whoever put this listing in, Karis, did a sufficient job from what I can see here. So not trying to single anybody out. But point being, you guys can always report those if you need to. We also have a system that goes through and checks all of the listings for us by default. Now, due to the limitations of how computers work and what kind of information we can actually have it search for without, paying tons and tons and tons more money to have some AI that helps us to further work. We just have to investigate a lot of stuff manually with our team of thankfully very competent and knowledgeable people. But the system does a lot of checks for us, thankfully, so we don't have to go through every single listing in order to be able to find some things that people might just have done wrong without even necessarily meaning. So we have a lot of opportunities for us to kind of educate people if the need arises. If they put something in that's wrong, we're just going to try and let them know that we need that to get corrected. It is also the system, though, that will go through and verify whether or not a particular listing has any other kinds of inaccuracies that do need to actually get corrected. And it's also the system that we use to verify whether or not something needs to be fined. So this system will be working no matter what time of day it is, which is I'm very grateful for. Now, if we do end up mentioning anything as an example that happens to be something that you or maybe someone you know has been uh, guilty of, so to speak, don't worry about mentioning that. We're not here to, again, call people out. Just want to make sure that you guys are familiar with this stuff. Again, the goal behind a lot of the interactions that we have on the service desk and in the training side of things is that we want to make sure that you guys understand how to do things right. And then we also want to help you guys understand why that's important. We don't want you guys to feel like we're just out here to get you. We're not trying to find people. In fact, actually, we very often, even in the way that we try to go about dealing with violations that we do find, we try to go about it in a way of making sure that we've educated people on what to do right and try to make sure that we don't get to the point that we're just sending out fines just because, we want more pizza parties or something. That's not our intention. We want to make sure that you guys are actually putting good data into the system, which brings us to our next point. What we are actually focusing on the MLS side of things is accurate, clean data. Now, so the goal behind an MLS, even from square one, back when we originally were dealing with making sure that there was going to be cooperation and compensation, now we're just focusing on cooperation. And part of that biggest point is going to ensure that when you guys are actually using MLS data, that you're actually going through and providing timely, accurate data as set by our rules and regulations. Now, complete and accurate data is obviously going to be important for just effectively marketing any properties that you guys are trying to market. But the long-term benefit is even better because now what that means is that there's going to be more accurate appraisals. There's going to be better CMAs. All of the things that you guys are going to be needing to use will be more accurate and more useful depending on whether or not you guys have actually gotten good data put in the first place. So while we're going through here, you guys are going to notice that a lot of this information that we're going to be discussing focuses pretty heavily on the information that's getting put into our system. It is our main focus. It's the main reason why our MLS has been as successful as it has, is because we make sure that we're trying to get as much good data as we can, and we try to police that as well as we can as well. All right. Now, there are some pretty big changes that I wanted to address first and foremost before we dive into any of the kind of generic things that we need to discuss. So I did want to address a couple important things that have changed due to the NAR settlement. And in fact, this is the reason why we ended up having the change go into effect on August 5th. First and foremost, on August 5th, we've removed all the terminology in the rules and regulations regarding compensation or commission. We are no longer in the game of trying to ensure that the compensation or commission is being advertised. In fact, we've actually removed any mention of the compensation or commission from listing data automatically. We've gone through to any of the previous listings that have ever been put into our system and have remained active or are still pending or withdrawn. If it was in any way still a listing that could go live or is still active, whatever the case may be, we've gone through and removed any mention of compensation or commission. We will continue to remove any compensation or commission mentions on any new listings for the indefinite future, but hopefully people will just stop putting that stuff in there, which thankfully has been slowing down dramatically even since we initiated these rules. Next, I wanted to mention there are some new paperwork things, and I did point this out already, but just as a gentle reminder, we are not in the business of the contracts. We don't deal with that stuff. We're interested in the data that you put in regards to those contracts and what those contracts are meant to represent. But we are not going to be helping you guys with the buyer's broker agreement or its implementation. All of those questions should be directed towards OREC. Now, another big thing that we wanted to address, and this is a change that's actually unrelated to the NAR settlement, but just some other stuff that we wanted to institute whenever we went through and made our changes in August. We're going to be including one major change. Photos. Photos are not necessarily required, but I did want to address one important thing here. Photos are required for listings with the exception of if you guys put in a virtual tour. So if you are going to be putting in a listing into our system, it has to have a photo or a virtual tour. Now, the vast majority of the time, people need to just put in a photo and that's it. But I did at least want to mention photos are effectively now required for listings. They have to show only the property. You can't have any photos of people. You can't have any logos or branding or any kind of self-promotion. It has to be focused entirely on the property. Now, you can take pictures of certain areas around the property. I did want to at least mention if you do have any listings in our system right now, always make sure that you guys have those photos matching just what needs to be advertised for the property. We have had people in the past that have uploaded photos to our system that have some kind of logos or branding. And in fact, actually, we got an interesting question the other day, whether or not a photographer could include their logo so that they can advertise their services to other people. No, the photos need to just be a photo of the property, and that's it. Nothing else, nothing more. When you guys are putting photos into our system, we at least now allow for animals to be in the photo. Previously, the phrasing was is that we didn't allow for animals to be the focus of the image. Now we will at least allow for animals to be present in the photo without any other qualms, but this was in part to allow for people who were selling land that had some kind of hunting available on it, and they wanted to be able to advertise what the actual animals might be that were on the land. Personally, I think this is probably going to cause at least some issues for people. If you have land that has animals on it now, those animals are not guaranteed. Their migration patterns might change. The animals that are present there might be depleted. Uh, Whatever the case may be, we have allowed it now. And again, there is a lot of land that we have in our system that is one of the major selling points is that they have animals that you can hunt on that land. And when you're selling hundreds of acres, totally makes sense. You want to make sure that people know everything that might come as a benefit to buying that land. So we allow it. Again, I would suggest doing so only within reason. Again, you don't want to put that, once in a generation deer as the primary photo of your property just because, you happen to see it on that land. If that guy's not going to be there next year or it's not indicative of the rest of the deer in that land, that could be a problem for a buyer. But again, just keep that within reason. Again, our rules, at least as far as what we'll discuss in a bit here, don't actually necessitate that you uh, clarify the bounty of the animals on that land. Anyway, another thing to mention, and this was actually kind of a major change, so I want to make sure you guys are aware of this. We are changing the way that we actually require square footage to be reported in our system. The biggest thing about this is that we no longer allow people to add listings without reporting the square footage, with the exception of it being either new or under construction properties, which coincidentally is also a thing for our media. I didn't mention it in this one, but the exception to the photos rule is also any properties that are new or under construction. But outside of those, if you have a property that has had people in that property for any amount of time, you got to have a square footage that's coming from one of three different sources: courthouse records, an appraisal, or the building permit. If the courthouse records don't happen to be correct because they haven't updated it in ages, fine. Just make sure that you guys get an appraisal. If you guys have a property that is new construction, you could always use that building permit as a source. Or if it's a relatively new house and you still have that building permit but don't have courthouse records or an appraisal, you can use separate building permit. But in the past, we used to allow people to put in listings into our system and then just say not reporting square footage and put a 0 for the square footage. And that would be fine. We are no longer allowing that. Any new listings to our system will have to have a square footage. Now, on your end, this is the important thing about this not reporting square footage note. When you guys are actually getting the listing details, you have to have this stuff before you guys actually get that listing agreement signed. This is one of the kind of not directly mentioned in the rules and regs, but when you're actually getting the listing prepared for entry, you have to have that listing into our system within 1 business day of its effective date. Now, if you have to have the square footage in order to be able to put that listing in, that means that before you actually go through the process of getting that contract signed, getting your listing effective date, getting that listing agreement signed, and everything copacetic, blah, 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 you have to have either the courthouse records, the appraisal, or a building permit to cite that square footage. Otherwise, you literally can't put the listing into the system. The system just won't let you anymore. So this could be a problem for people in the future. I just want to head that off and just mention, get that square footage and effectively get all the rest of the information about that listing ready before you try to get that listing agreement signed, and then before you subsequently put that listing into our system. So photos effectively are now required. Remember, we'll talk about the photos a little bit more later, so not to worry. And then also, square footage is going to be required unless it's either a new property that no one has ever lived in before and it's just brand new construction, or it's currently under construction. All right. Now, let's move on back to just the regular material for the class. And actually, this is where we're going to dive back into just generic things that people are going to run into. So first, I wanted to mention some of the most violated rules. Now, these are things that thankfully are relatively easy to avoid, and even better, they're often things that even if there is a fine attached to it, we're going to try really hard to make sure that you don't have to get that fine. One of the biggest things that we see happen frequently, and by far the most common violation to our rules, is the anticipated closing date. As we'll discuss in a little bit here, when you guys are putting listings into the system, it's not just a matter of making sure that all the accurate data has been put in, it's also making sure that that data is changed at the appropriate time. The anticipated closing date in our system is meant to effectively just say, I'm going to remind you that this property needs to be closed within X amount of time. And once that time frame happens, hopefully you'll remember to check your listing data and check with the title company, see if it's passed from seller to buyer. Cool, close it out, done. If an anticipated closing date goes into the past, we will start sending you guys notices in Matrix. We will start sending you emails, and then we will start doing this immediately after that anticipated closing date. So as an example, if I had my anticipated closing date for yesterday, but of course it wasn't working because it was Labor Day, get back into the office today, I'm going to see a notice, I'm going to receive an email, and I will receive those emails and notices for the next 30 days. Now, after that 30 days, if I still have yet to update either the anticipated closing date on that listing to move it into the future, in case maybe, the deal is getting pushed out or complications with financing, blah, 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 all the million things that can go wrong, none of that is going to matter. Move that anticipated closing date into the future or close the listing. If that doesn't happen, a month after we sent that first notice, we will send you a fine. Now, this is something that we can very easily remedy. Again, everybody in the system should actually have the ability to make the change to the anticipated closing date and the mapping and add your own documents and add your own photos. All of that stuff is what everyone in our entire MLS can do. If there's a listing in the system that's yours, whether you don't have edited permission or you've got company-wide edited permission, you can always update the anticipated closing date. You can always add photos. You can always add disclosures. Next thing that we notice a lot of issues with is going to be firm exclusives. Firm exclusives actually need to be sent in within 1 business day of the effective date of that listing. Now you'll notice I'm going to continue using that phrase, effective date of the listing, just as a reminder when you're setting up the listing agreement. That listing agreement is actually not something that goes into effect the minute that you sign that. You have a listing effective date that should be mentioned on there. That's the date that we are actually concerned with. We don't care if you guys got this signed, last year. If the effective date is for tomorrow, that's when all of this stuff goes into effect. And speaking of which, same with our disclosures. The disclosures have to be put into the system within 1 business day of that listing going into our system. If after 3 business days there is still not a disclosure on that listing, we will send out a fine. It has to be uploaded with it. And I got a little distracted trying to discuss the effective date, but just as a reminder as well, firm exclusives, do not market any firm exclusives. In fact, on the paperwork that you're required to sign with your seller, it does explicitly mention no marketing can occur on that property, word of mouth only. But let's move on. I'm going to keep this a little bit quicker than usual. Again, we had a lot of changes, so some of this stuff I know you guys are probably already familiar with, so we'll just focus on the highlights here. Coming soon listings. Coming soon listings, as might seem to be the case, are actually just properties that are not necessarily ready for showing and can't accept any offers quite yet. It's literally just giving a preview to all of the people that are in the MLS. That's it. You do have the capability to send a coming soon listing from Matrix to a client if you would like to. I did want to point out, though, that that's the only way for you guys to share content for coming soon listings. They do not get syndicated out to Zillow or Trulia, Realtor.com, anywhere else until after they have moved into the active status. But a couple big notes here with coming soon. No showings, no offers. They do have up to 10 days in order for them to go back into the active status. Can't be any longer than that. And notably, in the rules and regulations, it very explicitly mentions that once you guys have actually set a date, you cannot move that date backwards. Meaning, if I set my date for Thursday, and then my seller lets me know, hey, we've got all the photos and the cleaning and the painting done, whatever the case may be, can you go ahead and make it active? I can't make it active today, can't make it active tomorrow. It'll just automatically become active on Thursday, which was the date that I initially set. Now, if the opposite ends up happening, if I end up having a client that says, hey, Thursday actually is a little too soon still, we still need some time to get the painting, photos, whatever, you can still move it forward. The idea behind this is that if I have, as a buyer's agent, a client that might be interested in that particular property, I see that it's coming soon, I let my client know, they're really excited about it, they want to go do a showing on it. Well, as soon as that showing is going to be available on the day that it's supposed to go active, if they get out there and lo and behold, it's already pending because somebody signed a contract on that a couple days ago, that could be a problem. Not only does it make it look like I wasn't working within the confines of the rules and regulations as the listing agent, but as the buyer's agent, now it looks like I just wasted my buyer's time by saying that there was a property that was going to be ready. Lo and behold, it wasn't. So there are some stipulations to coming soon. Not a lot of people are using this, and that actually is okay. As long as you guys are using it within reason and going within the confines of these stipulations, you should have no problem with it. A lot of people have actually been using coming soon as kind of a marketing opportunity. So they put the listing in as coming soon, even just a day before the listing is actually going to go active, to effectively prompt all of the realtors that might have clients that may be interested. And then it goes active the next day so that the clients themselves can actually see that listing as well as the rest of the public. But I've effectively given other buyers agents the opportunity to see it in advance of it actually going active. But other people are using it for their sellers to make sure that they've got time, the photos, etc. Pretty easy. All right, active. This one's really simple. I'll keep this short and sweet. These are currently for sale. It's a property that can be shown. And as always, the National Association of Realtors requires that within 1 business day of the listing effective date, not just when the agreement was signed, but the listing effective date, that listing should be put into the system as active. Easy peasy. Now, there is also going to be the active with contingent option. This is actually kind of a separate option for pending. If you guys have a signed contract, you can put it into pending. If the client that you guys are working with on the buyer side is maybe, still waiting on getting all of their stuff done, or their property is still contingent on selling, et cetera, you guys can actually put that in as an active listing that's effectively pending, but it's contingent. So if the contract of sale is contingent on the buyer's property, put it in as contingent. If you guys have it for a short sale, toss it in as contingent. You guys do have the option to, accept backup offers as well. So if the broker does decide, hey, that listing is pending, but I'm not too confident in that buyer, let's get some backup offers and leave it active with the seller's permission. Good to go. Now, next is going to be pending. Now, pending is literally just saying this is a property that is no longer active. It's no longer on the market. It's no longer accepting offers or showings. it has a signed sales contract with both the buyer and seller, and you guys have to make sure that that's noted within 3 business days. Now, you'll notice that our definition of pending is not dependent on any of the financing. The only thing that we are actually going to be concerned with when it comes to pending listings is that that sales contract has been signed by buyer and seller. That's it. Financing, earnest money being exchanged, blah, 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 blah. None of that matters to us. The only thing that's actually important for a listing to go from active to pending is that a sales contract is signed. There's no more offers being accepted. There's no more showings. Put it into pending. If you guys want to have a property that is marked as pending but still accepting backup offers, toss it into contingent. But very often we'll see people put in an active listing, leave it active indefinitely, and really it actually already has a signed sales contract on it and they just didn't bother putting it in pending. So make sure that that's all done in a timely manner. As mentioned, you got 3 business days. Now, another one that does have a stipulation on time is going to be closed. Once a property has actually had the title pass from seller to buyer, it needs to be marked as closed. Now, we do have a specific time frame on this one as well. If a property does end up having that title transfer, you need to let us know within 5 business days. So the easy way to remember this is when you guys are working with active, it needs to be put in within 1 business day. It needs to be marked as pending within 3 business days, and it needs to be marked as sold within 5 business days. So 1, 3, and 5. Leased is going to be the equivalent for closed. Withdrawn is another one that I think a lot of people misunderstand. Withdrawn is actually indicating to us that there is still a listing agreement in effect, but it's not something that's going to be taking showings. It's not taking offers. It's just they've got a listing agreement in effect. They're not marketing it. It's not on the market. However you want to phrase that, it's not accepting things. Another important note, and we'll actually mention this again in a minute here, but as a reminder, if you guys do have an active listing and they are not taking any showings on it, it has to be moved into the withdrawn status. So we had a situation recently where there was a house that had a pretty significant flooding event. That flooding was causing them to have to effectively just gut a portion of the house and do a whole bunch of work on it. And they didn't want to be marketing it during that time. Listing agreement was still in effect. They just put it into withdrawn. Once the repairs are all finished, they just take it out of withdrawn, put it back to active, and it's back on the market, good to go. You can also leave properties in, or listings. You can leave listings in withdrawn for 90 days. And on that 91st day, any of the days on market or even cumulative days on market will have been reset. But during that time frame, can't be shown, can't be marketed, can't take offers. It's just off the market. Now, the other one that I think a lot of people kind of understand to be withdrawn is the released option. Now, withdrawn is mentioning effectively that this property is still got a listing agreement in place. It just isn't being marketed. Released is indicating that there is no longer a listing agreement in place. It has been terminated. And if another agent wants to reach out to that seller and, let them know, hey, you can list with me instead or something, cool. That's fine. But the release is mentioning there has been a termination of the agreement, the termination of the relationship between the broker and that seller. Finally, we get to the expired, easy peasy. This just means that the listing has expired. Some of our listings can be put into the system for a year. A couple of them still are only in there for 6 months. When you see that a listing has expired, that doesn't necessarily mean that the listing agreement has expired. That might just mean that that piece of data has actually run out of its time in our system and subsequently has to be re-entered by the listing agent if there is still a listing agreement in place. All right. Now, we're going to keep this quick. I have a actual new part of the system that's going to be getting introduced soon. I'm actually legitimately excited for this because we've had so many problems with the statistical listings in the past that getting this opportunity to actually have a system function for statistical purposes listings is going to be a huge help or any of you guys who have to put in listings or admins, brokers even. But the rules are actually not going to change. Just how you actually put them into the system is going to be easier. So I want to focus in on just the rules for now. When you guys want to put in a listing that's going to just be for statistical purposes, this could be somebody that, sold a property that was, they signed a listing agreement, but they actually already had a buyer in place. This could be a situation where you have like a property that was built and they, just wanted to enter that data into the system so that we know what that neighborhood looks like for CMAs, comps, et cetera, et cetera. Statistical purposes listings are extremely helpful, valid pieces of information, but we have some stipulations about that. You guys have to have worked with the seller, either with a signed listing agreement or a sales fee agreement. So if you guys have a for sale by owner that you're representing the buyer on, cool, that can be a statistical purposes listing, as long as it includes the sale of the land. So no custom builds. This is a big problem that we've noticed recently, is that we found dozens and dozens and dozens of listings recently where a property was put in, or listing was put into the system as a residential property, but what was being sold was the build and not the land. We are in MLS. We are only interested in the actual real estate. We are not interested in the build information. If you guys sell a property that has a custom build on it and the land was being sold with the custom build on it, the only thing that we're actually interested in is the sale of the land. We actually have a specific rule about that, which we might actually just have to start including in this class. Also, the statistical purposes listings are actually explicitly mentioned in our closed listing data. That might change when we come out with this new system, but at least for now, it's worth pointing out that we don't want any statistical purposes listings information until after the property has sold. It has to be entered within 5 business days of that sold date, but we have a lot of people that'll be putting in listings that are effectively just statistical purposes listings. They enter them, they pend them, and then they just leave them pending indefinitely until it finally ends up closing. But we don't want that. We want this all to be entered on one day. Now, this is the part of the system that's actually going to get updated, where we will actually hopefully be getting rid of this unbolded portion, because we'll only allow you to just enter the data. And that's it. It won't have a list date. It won't have a pen date. It won't have a close date. It's just you put that information into our system. You told us when it was closed, and that's it. So I'm excited for that. But at least in the interim, wait until it's sold, then put it in and have all of those match the same day. Now, next, public remarks must read entered for statistical purposes only. And just copy that phrase and paste it into the listing. I don't know why people are trying to be funny about that, but anyway. Also, this one's not quite as frequently used, but it's worth pointing out. When you guys are putting listings into the system, you can put in 2 listings for the same property. There's a couple different situations for that, but the chief one that you guys should be concerned with is if the property is for sale and for lease at the same time, cool, that's fine. You guys can put in a property that's for sale and then also mention that it's for lease as well. This could be especially important if you guys have a residential property where they might want to do property management, but also maybe they just want to offload it. We also allow this for the commercial properties in the very near future. We'll let you guys know when that changes. All right. Now we're going to talk a bit more about the actual data entry. I just want to help you guys make sure that Now, first and foremost, just so you guys are aware, there is at least some liability for you guys on entering data into our system. So if you do end up entering something that is a problem or needs to be addressed or anything like that, you and you alone are going to be responsible for making sure that that is actually up to date. If you guys have an admin or a broker that's going to be entering listings for you or something like that, just make sure that you guys double check your listings and ensure that whoever it is that enters that data for you knows that there's a problem and gets that up to date. If it's your name on there, it doesn't matter if someone else puts in the data for you. It's still your name that's on there. I don't know why this is kind of a foreign concept to people, but again, just as a reminder, if you put something into our system and it's your name on there, it doesn't matter if an admin was the one that put it in wrong. It's still going to be advertised with you, right? Next thing, this is going to be our details that we have on the photos. I mentioned already some changes that we had to the photos and some of the other media, but public remarks, this is going to be the exact same rules that you guys have for photos. Always just mention the property. We have a lot of people that might end up putting in details about, all sorts of extraneous bits of information about the area or whatever. Always just make sure that you guys are describing the property factually. I would strongly suggest avoiding any flowery language, but there's no rule about that. That's how a lot of people will stumble their way into a fair housing violation. Also, this is a big no-no, just like with the photos. Don't include any information about yourself, your office, any contact information. Again, we had that photographer that wanted to make sure that his work was being advertised, and cool, but not the right place to do it. The MLS is also not responsible for any of the content in the public remarks. As mentioned, you will be the one that's liable for that. Directions, you guys have to put in directions to the property. I know this seems like it might be a little bit silly to hear, but I did want to at least mention there are still people out here doing life with the flip phone. It boggles my mind every time I hear about it. But we do have agents out here who are still just running around with flip phones, don't have a smartphone, and they are legitimately just going out there with like a printed copy of the listing information and using the directions on there to get there. So strongly recommended that you guys always put in something that's useful. It's also worth pointing out, as maybe you guys might have mentioned, there actually was an incident earlier this year where, lo and behold, all of the cell phone towers went down. So as you could probably imagine, without any of the cell phone towers, a lot of people were missing data. They couldn't get anywhere that they needed to go, blah, 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 blah. But one of the big things was that there were still people out there going to some rural property that had a printed copy of the listing details and got to their destination because there was useful direction. We don't allow just putting in something like use GPS or use Google Maps or use Apple Maps, or I don't know if anybody's using Apple Maps, but anyway, broker remarks. Also, one of the big things that we see from time to time is mentioning contractors or people that are non-members. You guys can put in information about the seller or tenant, or maybe how to put in an offer or whatever the case may be, but that's it. Keep it simple. Now, the media. We do have, and actually I need to make a change to this. I apologize. I knew it was going to sneak in at least one problem here, but photos are required. Just remove this exception for that. All right. Anyway, main photo has to be of the front exterior of the house or an aerial view of the property. So if you guys do choose to include the media on your listing that's a photo, the main photo, the primary photo for the property has to be, for the listing, has to be the front exterior of the house or an aerial shot of the property. No self-promotion. As mentioned before, no pictures of signs, no images with contact info. You can't have your real estate sign in the yard and take a picture of it. And then on the virtual tours, any company that's actually producing virtual tours should be able to provide you guys with both a branded version for your own marketing and advertising on social media, whatever. But then also there should be an unbranded version that'll be just for the MLS, because that branding rule is actually something that's universal. So no branding in the virtual tour, no branding in photos, just focus on the property. And actually, so I need to fix this too. People. That's easy to fix too. Anyway, and then also model homes are allowed. This was actually a kind of hotly contested issue recently, but If you guys do have a new construction property and that model home is exactly representative of the property that the client would be buying, that's fine. Again, the idea behind a lot of this is to ensure that when you guys are putting listings into the system, you're accurately representing what's going to be bought or sold. So no modifying of images outside of changing lighting. I have an unfortunately great example of this. We had someone who was going to be selling a property, and at one point in time or another, whoever it was that was editing their photos removed a fire hydrant that was in the front lawn. Obviously, this was a bit problematic because everybody that came to look at the property kept on seeing this fire hydrant that was in the front lawn, which, I mean, best case scenario, you know, never have to worry about it. Worst case scenario, fire department's going to be all up in your yard. So just don't remove stuff. You can change your lighting. For my part, if I am going to make a recommendation about not making changes to photos, we see a lot of people that'll end up putting in changes to photos where they put the sunset behind the house, which cool, looks great. But if that house is actually facing, I don't know, west, that's a sunrise. Colors are different. We've got people that have got houses that are facing north, and there will be a sunset in the background, and that one really grinds my gears. But anyway, also, this was a big one, especially over the last few years. It wasn't a problem that much until more recently when people are really churning the listings out. But other than creating CMAs, you can't use photos from another person's listing without explicit written permission from the original listing agent. We've had people that have just grabbed all the photos from previous listings and used them for their new listing. Those photos are not yours to use that way. They do have to have some written permission exchanged between you and the listing agent, whoever it was that originally listed those photos. And this one we can remove as well. Right. Now we're actually almost done, and then I'm going to open up for a question and answer phase. Okay. One of the main things, and this is kind of tied into what we just mentioned, all of the data that you guys put into the MLS is going to be copyrighted by our system immediately. So what that means is that any photos that you guys do add to our system will get copyrighted immediately in our system. So beyond whatever copyrights your photographer had to protect them and their IP, that we're going to be doing the same thing with all the listing data that you guys enter into our system. This is to ensure that people aren't just ripping off our data, and that there will be some legal repercussions if there is a situation where, lo and behold, somebody just stole a bunch of our data and is marketing it elsewhere. So it is copyrighted. Also, I did want to mention, if you guys do share data from our system, there's almost always going to be, at least in systems that are worth their salt, based on information from MLS technology for the period blank through blank, pretty much any system that you guys are using that'll automatically share listing data should have that in there by default, which is great. Then you guys don't have to worry about it. Next, I did want to mention one of the biggest problems, at least for me personally, is not sharing your password. I just want to remind you guys one last time, when you guys are interacting with our system, you are doing so through your own permission. If you provide your username and password to another individual and they do something that they shouldn't, that can be your responsibility. Now, what that means is that no one should be sharing their passwords with their spouses. Doesn't matter if you guys work together. Doesn't matter if you guys are on the same team. They sign in as you and do something that they shouldn't have, you're the one that's going to be responsible. No assistants can be signing in as you. This is another big problem that I see a lot of people have. But thankfully, we have a bunch of different ways for you guys to get assistants permission to our system and even to work as you. So there is no reason for you guys to be providing your password to the person when they can get their own username and password. And on top of that, instead of them signing in as you, and lo and behold, they did something wrong, and you're suddenly responsible, if they are in our system as an assistant and signing in with your permission to work as them will know that they were the one making those changes and not you, which can be very beneficial. No admins, no brokers, no other agents. And if we do end up having any notifications of this, it is a $500 fine, which is on the cusp of actually starting to get sent out to people because we've had a bunch of issues. Again, this is more just a pet peeve of ours on the IT side of things because this is a huge problem. If somebody signs in as you and does something that they're not supposed to, how are we supposed to prove that it was someone else? Anyway, but I did want to leave off there, and we will open up to any questions that you guys may have. Again, any issues, questions, problems, you can always reach out to us the rest of the time. Support at mlstechnology.com for any emailed questions. We do check those even on the weekends if there is any kind of like system outages, but it's worth mentioning. Probably not going to respond until Monday anyway. But the rest of the time, if you guys need to get in contact with us, we are actually going to be available on the phones or in the office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30. But I'll leave it there, and we can now move on to question and answer. Officially, our class is done. If you guys wouldn't mind, hit that raise hand button just to let me know that you guys are still here. I'll use that for our OREC reporting. This is just, again, effectively letting me know that you guys are actually still present and interacting. Then you can send that over to OREC for your certification. So Anne, Sharon, Christina, Helen, I saw yours flash up for a moment. Oh, and 8, perfect. All right, that's everybody. But again, at this point, if you guys do end up wanting to head out, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to go ahead and cut that off, and we can move on to question and answer. Now, there is a question and answer option down at the bottom of your screen, or you guys can post in chat. I'm watching both of them right now, so either one should be fine. And again, I apologize for the split in the recording. That was unfortunate. I got to do some troubleshooting on this computer. Oh, that's a good question. I see signs every day with the agent's photos. Is that still allowed? Yes. In fact, actually, we don't have any real hard and fast rules about the signs outside of just mentioning that we don't want them to be in the photos. The list. If you have a photo on your sign and it's not actually showing up on the listing data, cool, easy peasy. Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll leave the session open for another couple minutes here, but again, down at the bottom is that little Q&A option, or you can hit that raise hand button at this point. There's no reason for us not to answer questions with voice. Right. Well, guess we can go ahead and close up shop. Again, if you guys do have any other questions or problems, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the service desk. Um, we're happy to help. Again, we're here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30. So if there are any problems that you guys have, questions you have, the system's not doing something, trouble uploading disclosures, anything, just give us a call. Let us know. That's what we're here for. We're happy to help. All right. I'm going to go ahead and close up shop. Again, have a good one. Stay safe. Stay cool out there in this awful heat. See you guys later.